Hey there, I just wanted to take a second to say thank you so much for watching this episode of The Shepherd Station. If you feel this has added some value to your life, it would mean so much to us if you would share this episode with someone else. It helps us so much when you do that. It would go a long way in supporting our mission to help men become better fathers, husbands, and leaders. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and give us a like. If you're listening to us through Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you listen to podcasts, follow us, leave us a review, and let us know how we're doing. We want to hear from you. All right, that's all I've got. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Hello and welcome to the Shepherd Station. I'm Eric Duhame. With me again today is Andy Hughes to my right and Thomas Brown to my left. I guess that might be a little bit different for you guys.
Backwards for
but
everybody
a little
else.
bit backwards for everybody else. Hey, we're coming to you from the Stockyard in Headland, Alabama, 24 East Church Street. Come by and see us. We're on the square. Great sandwiches, great soups, great salads, great place to hang out, excellent coffee. We get all our coffee from Mural City. Coffee Works in Dothan, Alabama. If you can't come see us, go see them. We got a really good show today. We have Jeff Daukas. I'm going to let Andy introduce him. This is one of Andy's good friends. He's got a plethora of knowledge and leadership in law enforcement. And with that, Andy, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Jeff, thank you for being with us this morning all the way from Glendale, Arizona. I first met Jeff back in October. Never knew the guy, had seen him on a list of speakers. Myself and Jeff were both speakers at a law enforcement conference in Indiana back in October, one put on by Jim Bontrager, super guy that we're going to have on the show here too one day. But there's he got a conference up there he runs every year called Breaching the Barricade. It's a tremendous conference for law enforcement officers and for their families. And if you ever get a chance to attend, I would encourage you to go because it's actually free. You just gotta get there. But Jeff is a sergeant. I'm going to let him expound a little bit more on his career and what he does. But Jeff's a sergeant with the Glendale, Arizona Police Department. He's got about 21 years of experience there in Glendale. He's a tremendous speaker. This guy approached me. I was eating breakfast the morning of the first day of the conference, and I was eating breakfast by myself in the hotel breakfast area, and Jeff just approached me and said, "Hey, Andy, I'm Jeff Daukas. We'll be speaking together later. I just wanted to stop and introduce myself to you. I'll get with you later in the day." So went on, and we got several different, rooms with different speakers going on. Had a main room. So me and Jeff both were speaking in the main conference room. And right before I was about to go on stage, they were doing some administrative stuff, giving away some door prizes and that kind of thing. And I was already mic'd up and I'm waiting. There's about 200 people in this place. And Jeff just walks over, puts his hand on my shoulder and says, "Hey, brother, can I pray for you?" And I said, "You sure can." So he right there said a prayer for me before I went on stage, and he got up and did my presentation. And him and his family met me after I come off stage, and we had a good conversation, and we've been in constant contact since then. Jeff is definitely a man of God, a man of tremendous faith. He's pretty much a theologian too. I found out. Just got a lot of knowledge about the Bible, things that he's took upon and studied for himself, as all Christians should know their Bible and know their faith and know their Christianity. So we can be apologetics for that we can defend our faith. Not that it needs defending, but we can explain our faith and share it with others too.
I think what you're trying to say is that we can be bold in our faith.
That's right. Be very bold in our faith. If you're not bold in your faith, I think you need to really look into your heart and check out your Christianity and your commitment to God. So, but Jeff, we're glad to have you on this morning. You want to tell us a little bit about your background and your career?
Sure. Well, I wanted to talk about something up front. When you said being bold in your faith too, boldness comes from confidence, right? Mm-hmm. And you can be confident in your faith once you learn about your faith. It's no different than in law enforcement when, even as we were saying before we started recording, I'm on the range yesterday to become more proficient and more competent and more confident with my firearm. And so I can be bold in my application when I use my firearm. And you would talk about, Andy, you speak about bearing the sword. Well, you can be a weak man bearing a heavy sword, or you can be a bold man bearing a confident sword. And I'm not going to walk through life knowing that the greatest gift I've ever had a chance to receive through nothing of my own, I just take for granted. I want to learn as much about my faith as possible. So when you said that, I just really want to highlight that, because I think that a lot of people, if we talk about leadership, which is, I guess, an underpinning of what your podcast is about, right?
Right. Yeah.
Talk about leadership, then we should also talk about followership. And I follow Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and that is why I do what I do. But I guess we could probably just stop right there, right, and just take questions from people as they call in. But my background, like Andy said, I've been in law enforcement actually 25 years. I started with the Adult Probation Department on the second largest county in the United States, in Maricopa County. And that was interesting, to say the least. When you see the back end, if you guys being in law enforcement, right, we make arrests, people get sentenced, they get accountable, but we just move on. We move on to the next call for service or the next barricade or the next court hearing or whatever. But as a, excuse me, as a probation officer, I would get these people after their sentence and a suspension, and they would come in looking all nice in a shirt and tie, and I'd read their police reports like it was a Stephen King novel. You know, these men and women that would come in and put on their game face for me as their PO I wasn't saved then. So I would look at this and go, you guys are not good people. And my job is to be, the hammer to you in that role. And so I did that about 3 years. I was from 99 until about 2001. And you guys remember what happened in September of 2001.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here in my office and I'm seeing these men and women after 9/11 happened. We were downtown. I was in the federal building when the sirens went off. People, it's crazy. I teach a lot on Nobility. I teach on courageous nobility. That's my podcast and my Substack. But, we're talking about leadership, and I'm down the federal building and I tell the story, and all the klaxons went off. They go, "What's a klaxon?" I go, "How old are you?"
Right.
So we weren't alive on 9/11. I go, "Okay." Story's getting a little dated, but it still is relevant for me. So I see the men and women in law enforcement. I told my wife I can do more, and I wanted to do more as a police officer, because as a probation officer in Arizona, you have qualified law enforcement authority. It's really weird. So you're considered part of law enforcement, but you don't have arrest powers. So
Really?
It's like all the liability and none of the fun, right?
Really?
So it was challenging. So got myself back into shape. I was a college athlete, and then like all burnout college athletes, I went completely opposite. I was almost 260 pounds at 5'10", with a full beard to cover my fat rolls, right? A couple earrings. I was very cool. I was very cool to be me. I ended up losing 60 pounds due largely to pneumonia and what the Lord had planned. And then in 2002, got hired in my department, and I've been going there ever since. I've had the pleasure to work. I remember listening to your first podcast, and I listened to you guys' bios, and I thought, man, if I could actually be in a room and shake your guys' hands, I just appreciate every one of you, from Andy to Eric to Thomas, for the way that you guys choose to serve and do what the Lord calls you to do. But I was in neighborhood patrol services, like, where everybody starts off, right? Mm-hmm. And then I was a little older when I started. They call me Gramps because I graduated, I was 28, which is funny. We just had a guy go through at 55 in the academy that I was teaching at. So that was crazy. But I was 28. I did neighborhood patrol resources in our divisions, different divisions. And then when I was turned 30 in 2005, we had our first kid. And my boy, Ethan, when he was 4 months old, I remember being in the middle, this is part of my testimony, being in the middle of some kind of random intense fellowship with my wife, right? That involved Corona. And I had no desire to be in that conversation anymore. And like, as any good leader realizes, there's a time to retreat. So I just was not going to fight with my wife anymore. And so I just went into the bedroom and I was just watching my kids sleep. And y'all know that as a first-time dad, right? Seeing a baby sleep is just a miracle. And I didn't have a faith, right? So I'm just watching this little kid. And I remember saying this. And if you saw, I did the interview where I said the same thing. And it's as real then back in 2005 as it is today for me right now. I can picture the color of the walls. I know the temperature in the house. I know what I was wearing. I don't know the date. But I can tell you that I knelt down by my kid's bed and watched him sleep in that little baby burrito, right? And I remember seeing him sleep, and he's breathing like 1,000 miles a minute. And I remember thinking, I'm not the man I need to be. I'm not the husband I need to be. I'm not the father I need to be. I wasn't the brother, the cop, anything I needed to be. And then I remember looking at my son, and he did one of those like hitch breaths, a little bit, right? And he was like, yeah. And then it was almost like And I knew that this little boy is going to grow up hating the man that I am today. And he was going to hate me because I knew everybody has that hole in their heart that they know we're made in God's image, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that image is stained by sin. And so you look through a dirty mirror, basically, right? That's what Paul would say. But I knew right then I had to give my heart. And I just remember feeling the Lord saying, okay, are you done? Are you done? And I gave my heart to Christ in that exact moment. I struggled with alcohol through my career, but now I can tell you January 27th, 2017 was my last drink. So I've been sober since then.
Wow.
And that, that isn't a testimony of my strength and sobriety. It simply just wasn't for me anymore.
Mm.
Because going through my career, you talk about history, right? Patrol services, and I was a training officer, then a detective, from property to fraud, forgery to violent crimes. And then my last couple of years, I was a homicide detective. Promoted in 2013. I had been on our protester negotiation team. I took that over as supervisor in 2014. So I ran that from 2014 to 2020. I was our field training supervisor, ran the field training unit for 4 years, and then a detective sergeant for 2.5, and got back to the joy of my life, which is day shift, weekends off patrol now as a senior sergeant.
You deserve it, right?
Yeah.
You've
So
earned
now
it.
now I work on North District, and I work with like the senior guys in our police department with the emphasis on integrity and character and nobility and followership and faith. Is all based on our reckless pursuit of Jesus Christ, isn't it?
Right.
It's got to be. And people don't know that. They don't know that in the job. And so we have an obligation. I'm our lead defensive tactics instructor as far as seniority. Now I'm a little long in the tooth, a little gray in the hair here, but we can still roll around with some of these kids. I use these different things. I teach criminal law at the police academy. I have a master's in criminal justice. I had a privilege to teach in the colleges here for about 4 years. And every setting, through the academies, through the colleges, through my squads, it's an opportunity to build relationships, right?
Right.
Because that's the vehicle by which the gospel is moving forward. There are people like Billy Graham that can walk into a room of 1 million people, right, and deliver an on-point message. But I will tell you right now that the consistency and longevity of where our faith leads us happens through relationships. And so when I saw Andy at our conference, I'm with my wife and kids, and I've never been to a conference before as a speaker. So I wanted my family to be with me, and we're having breakfast. And I tell them, I go, guys, that's Andy R. Hughes. And do you know that's Andy Hughes? And my wife's like,
Who is that? Exactly. Like everybody else would have said too.
Here we are in the Midwest where everybody knows you guys, and I come from Arizona where it's the most transient culture in America. You can't find anybody that actually says they were born and raised in Phoenix, right? So, so I'm sitting there and I walk over because out of an immense amount of respect, just by reading your bio, I said, I need to go and shake this man's hand, if for nothing else, for the years of continued service that you gave to law enforcement. And so when I walked up to him, he, the Southern drawl kind of just pulls you in. And here's this big guy in this brown sport coat. Well, hey there, Jeff. He called me Jeff, but it sounded like Jeff. I
can actually picture that.
But that was pretty good.
Yeah.
We shook hands, and I knew right then, I said, this is a man of integrity. And integrity is attractional. And I want to keep that in your mind. Integrity is attractional. So we go on through the conference. We hear Thomas Lemmer speak, Dave Funkhauser speak. And I had been up in the morning, and interestingly enough, that trip for our family was extremely difficult. My oldest got massive flu. He was, he was drinking the little flu shots, like they were going out of style, right? So he's struggling. He's flop sweating at the table. I got another kid who's like, Dad, I'm hungry, right? But we're just in the moment, excited. And then I see Andy get up, and I watch him walk over. He's mic'd up, and he's pacing. What Andy didn't say is he's pacing in the corner of this area behind like a prep screen. And I could tell that he had a lot in his mind. And I told my wife, I'm just going to go and pray for him. And she said, you should leave him alone. He's just getting ready. I go, he's not ready yet.
That's right.
You know?
Well, that was the first. That was
know.
the first big venue where I had actually delivered my Bear the Sword presentation. It was my first big chance, and I was actually over praying under my breath myself whenever you approached me. You know, I remember it, and I was telling these guys about it earlier, and I was like, this guy just walks over to me. I barely know him. He just spoke to me, and he asked me hey, brother, can I pray for you? And I said, you sure can.
Yeah, and we prayed for boldness of speech. We prayed for open ears, if you remember. And we prayed that the message you gave would be the one the Lord put in your heart. Mm. And you smiled at me and you said, thanks, Jeff. so I just ambled on back to my chair, right? And sat down and was blown away by the intentional integrity that was attractional to people, because people don't need to hear about how great and all the things we've done, all the awards that we've won, all these different things. What they need to hear is that broken men and women can find an example in you or me or someone else, and that we are moving forward. And then they ask, why is that? And that's where I said the relationships, the one-on-one start, and the small groups, and the forum that you guys are putting on, this amazing podcast that you guys are collaborating on, is another vehicle by which to draw relationships. And the relationships are going to be the vehicle for the gospel. Mm. So how about that for an opener, huh?
That's awesome.
Yeah. Outstanding.
Yeah. You can come do our intro every week.
We're going to take that, Jeff, we're going to take that and we're going to make that our new intro. Yeah. That whole thing you just did, I appreciate you doing that for us, because we've been trying to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, no
you
problem. It's $1 million. Thomas and I are splitting it.
Yeah. We were just talking about what Thomas is going to owe us. Yeah. So, we're going to owe Thomas. That's all right.
Yeah. Tell us, Jeff, tell us a little bit about your presentation, Courageous Nobility. Tell us about what you do and what's your goal. And like you just said, it's about the relationships. It's never about the man. It's always about the message, and letting God use us to deliver his message. And, you know, I constantly pray, God, just continue to help me to be a worthy vessel, because I don't think God's not going to use an unworthy vessel. He wants to use a worthy vessel, and I think it takes a lot to try to remain to be a worthy vessel that God will use to deliver his message for his kingdom and his purpose and his mission and his glory. So tell us a little bit about Courageous Nobility and what it's all about, and what your message is, how God gave you this message, and how you're delivering it.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm going to check you on something. You had said it's not about the man, it's about the message, but the message can't be heard unless you wouldn't have prayed the second part of your prayer, right, unless the man of character was something relevant, right? So we're asked to do something with our lives because the Lord has given it to us. And so we don't seek the praise and glory of other people. In fact, in the New Testament, my wife and I are constantly talking about, you know, we aspire to live a quiet life. And I go, how come that keeps getting messed up? How come people keep wanting us to do different things? But it is the character of the messenger allows the message to be as unfiltered for the gospel as possible, right? And I think, Thomas, I see you shaking your head. You would agree, Thomas, right, that if you were to stand up in front of your congregation and say, with a cigarette in your mouth, and be like, listen here, I'm gonna tell you guys right now, you know, raw MAGA, and it's all about politics. Like the delivery of the messenger can mar the message. Mm-hmm. And that's why we want to be men of integrity, because we don't want to give a message about who we serve that's improper. So that's always been my driver. I need to take you guys back a bit. Now, in fairness, Andy did tell me to go ahead and talk about my story. So I just want to point that out. Okay. So
we've unleashed the line.
It is
go for it.
Yeah.
That's a lot. You just opened the door, brother. So I'm the oldest of 4 boys. My dad just passed away on June 13th. So I had come to this conference still extremely grieving from losing my dad, who was one of the greatest men I've ever had the privilege to know. Hands down, one of the greatest men. In fact, Andy and I have a lot of similarities in that he saw in his dad the driver that allowed him to set examples and goals and faith to become a police officer. My dad taught me about integrity. My dad was not saved his whole life. My mom was Catholic, and so we grew up, mom's Italian and dad's Irish. So you can imagine dinner was a lot of this stuff, and There was always a lot of alcohol. There was always a lot of pasta.
A little bit of an explosive combination in there, Jeff.
Well, let me tell you something. Dinners were a mandate. And even as we got older, as the boys, because all of us were athletes all through our lives. And so Sundays, dinners, and if you know anything about Italian families, dinner starts at 4. And you're there at 4 and it ends at 7.
No.
And there was a cutoff because you had to make sure that we were good to go. And you'd have the football game on too. So, I mean, there was a lot of noise, a lot of 4 boys. At some point, my mom was telling stories. She said, growing up, she spent $500 a week on groceries, and that we would sit down every day, and have a box of cereal per boy. That's 5 bowls.
Well, now I understand the 260 pounds.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I was a swimmer and a water polo player and soccer. So, when you're going through it, we were burning calories like it was crazy. Yeah. But if you just keep eating like that when you're in college and beyond, then that doesn't help out a lot. But regardless, so my dad teaches us about integrity. Mom was a stay-at-home mom, did the hard work of getting us in line. 4 boys, small Italian woman. Yes, ma'am, was pretty much what we said the whole time. Dad worked 16-hour days for 43 years till he had a heart attack. God bypassed his heart. In fact, the cardiologist said, your body created a natural bypass. We don't know how that happened. I was there to get him out of the hospital. He had retired at that point. So you talk about like the message that God gave me when I was in probation, even farther back through high school and college, I would always take stands of integrity for people, right? So I already knew what I believed in. I was like, well, if you don't like me, whatever, forget you, right? But for other people and these other situations, I would just I would bear their sword, Andy. How about that? I'm going to throw that in there. I would bear their sword for them and they wouldn't ask me to, which of course would lead me into a lot of problems, right? You fight battles for people that are not your battles to fight, right? And that was more about me for me. Wasn't about integrity, although I masked it as that. In college, I got married to my sweet bride, Brandy. She was 21, I was 22. And we just celebrated 28 years from our first date and 26 years married. So God is good.
Yeah.
Congratulations, man.
And we got these 2 beautiful boys I'll talk about later. But so I move into law enforcement and I'm that guy. I am high speed, low drag. I had told people I had blonde hair and that was only as a mistake. I grabbed some hair gel because I needed hair gel going to work. I forgot. So I'm at the local Walmart. Y'all got Walmart there in the Midwest.
I like that, y'all.
Yeah. And y'all singular, I learned because I was in San Antonio for a bit, and all y'all's plural.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I grabbed gel, and later on, people are staring at me like, and I look in the mirror, and my hair is brownish, and it's turning orange, and I look, and it's lightning gel. I have peroxide in it.
Oh my gosh.
So I went crazy, man. The next 5 days, I just saturated, and I became Jeff and M. And it was consistent. Here's the thing. Did you start rapping? Consistent with the man I was at the time. I was all gangster rap and violence. And you know what? I was going to fight everyone in the street. I was going to be the toughest dude in the room. And that way the bad guys will fear me. The officers will respect me. And then I'll just start my climb to chiefhood. Right. That was my goal. And interestingly enough, about 3 years in is when I was saved. I was a training officer at the time, and I had some senior training officers come to me and say, "What are you doing? You're out of control." And it shook my world. I said, "What do you mean? I'm a man of integrity. I'm hardcore. I shoot the wings off a gnat at 1,000 yards. What are you kidding me? Come on." And they said, "No, man, you're out of control. People don't respect you. They laugh at you. And the bad guys don't fear you. They look for ways to take your gun and end your life." And that was in the same about 90-day period when the Lord broke me right after my kid was born. Because all of a sudden you realize it's not just me and my wife anymore. I'm living for a kid. I better dial it in. And so all that came full circle. And then I started to see what integrity meant. And I started to see that men of integrity were men of faith. Men of integrity were men of purpose. Men that knew their identity of who they were and who they were made to be. And I didn't know any other way but that. And so now I'm a first grader again in class. And as Andy said, I've devoted my time since 2005 in studying and learning God's word. I do have a life goal of learning Greek and Hebrew so I can read the original text because it's It's critical. It's critical that you know your source material. Don't give me a policy manual about how to be a police officer without explaining the why behind it. Well, I have the Bible and I have a why, but I don't have any knowledge. I start learning about integrity. I start writing different articles.
Can I go back to when those guys told you that about yourself?
That was a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. Like, how did you respond to that? Were you like the next day, like, okay, yeah, totally, I accept everything you said. Look, this is great. We're going to move on.
For the police officers in the room, how would you, not being saved, how would you respond to direct conflict, to direct action movement on your position?
You stand up and you move through it. You know? Yeah. Well, when I say move through it, you stand up to it.
They talk about moving off the X, right?
Yeah.
I was ambushed. I moved off the X. I didn't look to go around the problem, Eric, like you said. I went through it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You stand up if somebody comes at you, and a similar story. I had a sergeant when I was first in patrol, and man, I had to be the one going to every call. If there was something going on, I had to go to it, man. I wanted to be on fire, right? And they did the same thing. They came to me and said, man, you got to slow down. You need to stop. And same thing went through my head. Why? I'm out here doing the job, And as, type A people, when somebody comes at you like, hey, you're wrong, your first inclination is to stand up and go, no, I'm not. And this is why I'm not wrong. So I could see what you're saying there. Yeah. You wanted to go through it.
Yeah. And I wanted to go through these guys too, because
hey, do you know who I am? It was like, hey, do you know who I am? I'm Andy Hughes.
Right.
I'm Jeff Daukas.
John Wick hadn't come
I'm
out
a legend.
yet, so.
I'm a legend in Glendale, Arizona. Right?
Yeah. I
know,
had a pretty big mind,
yeah.
and that's the legend. I was the one. But like I said, John Wick hadn't come out yet, so I was the closest thing to John Wick I could be. I was like, I'm going to have to go through you. Yeah, go through them. So I didn't, Thomas, to your point, sir, I didn't respond well to that criticism, because why would you criticize perfection?
Right.
I mean,
Totally.
Hey, no, look, I was very humble as long as you knew I was right.
Yeah.
Right. And I joke around about that, and we can laugh about that, because, and if you're laughing with me, guys, you understand your own heart. You have been in places or positions where that has broken you as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
And it's not sustainable, and it wasn't tenable. And here's the issue, Thomas, that these men that came to me, these were guys that I looked up to because of what they've achieved and their reputation. These were men that I saw in a different way. And so now so like when you meet your heroes, right? And when these men are giving me counsel, as much as I was rearing back to punch them, anybody takes a reflective pause and goes, well, maybe they're right. And if they're right, I'm kind of a jerk. And then I just started playing the if-then. If I'm kind of a jerk, then that means everything I believe in is wrong. And if what I believe in is wrong, then how I'm acting is wrong. And it just went down there. And it was great that God used those situations to till the soil, so that when he moved on me using my son in an argument, right, with my wife, then I was ready to go, okay, well, now I have an at-home, I have an at-work, and now I have an at-home example of how that wasn't playing out. And so there wasn't any stability in any pillars of my life that I could stand back on and say, yep, the decisions I made were really great decisions.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's really
Now
good that you said
up.
that the hard word is what prepared you for God's, truth in your life. The hard word from those people, it was like God tilling the ground, you said. That's so good. And that, I think it would help us be more graceful, probably, if we saw all conflict that way, that it's just like the Bible says, iron sharpens iron, right? So that's a really good reminder.
Yeah, and what I didn't know about this guy is that he was raised in the church, but he actually retired due to PTSD stuff after like 30 years. But then he reached out to me because he had heard about the ministry going on, and he had called me to pray for him. And he actually lives down the road a piece. And so my wife and I have had them over, and we lead Bible studies and stuff. And it's really crazy. We tell the story a lot to younger people about how God doesn't waste anything, And so that's the point of integrity. Andy, you had asked about integrity too. and the message. So it takes a lot of courage to stand alone. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm. A lot.
It takes courage to stand alone when you're wrong, but that's short-lived because then you find courage being wrong elsewhere. It takes courage standing by yourself when you're right because there's longevity with that, especially if you have integrity. If you have the core belief and fortitude that what you say is who you are. My wife is always telling our kids, we homeschool, and my wife is an amazing woman. I pray that you guys get a chance and your wives to meet her because she's the one. She's the bedrock. But she's always telling, if you're right and and the Lord tells you you're right, you have no need to fight with somebody. If you're right, stand in your position.
Mm-hmm.
And so I read a Substack, and I don't know if you guys are aware of the Substack stuff. I saw that some people had signed up recently.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a writing platform. So I see a guy named Travis Yates, who you guys probably know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Travis, I see him write something, and it was on January 9th of 23. And I know that because I was preaching that day. And it's 7 a.m. I'm getting ready to leave at 8 to preach. And I see this guy write this article. And I was like, man, I told my wife, I've read this guy's stuff in Law Officer. I'm just going to comment. And she looks at me like, we have to go. You have an hour. This is not the time to be thinking about, doing this stuff. Okay. So I do. And he responds back, which is weird. You don't ever think that somebody, like in my mind, a man of that caliber it's like with you guys, men of your caliber, I believe, like, you have no reason to talk to a guy like me. But since you did, or since he did, I was over the moon with that. And he responds with this huge reply saying, Jeff, we need to have a conversation. Call me later. And he gives me his number. So I'm now blown away.
Mm-hmm.
But the message and the service was amazing. So that rightly blew me away. And I completely forgot until later that afternoon. Brandy tells me, hey, did you ever call this guy back? And I'm, oh my goodness. He's in the Midwest, which, time never runs in the Midwest. So it's probably noon still there and whatever.
He's on Tulsa time, just like the old song,
Yeah.
Living on Tulsa time.
Yeah, it's amazing. So we get on a phone call for about 2.5 hours. Unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
He says, do you do any writing? I said, yeah, I write a lot. So he encourages me to start writing. I started getting a bunch of articles published in Law Officer, feature articles. And the feature article was called Courageous Nobility. And we had just had a time to talk. Travis had me on his podcast. I helped is wrong. I spoke for 20 minutes at his Courageous Leadership seminar when we went up in Prescott. He allowed me to be present with that. That was cool. But I told him, I said, here's Courageous Nobility in a nutshell. I said, it's men or women doing the right thing in the right way, at the right place at the right time, that practical wisdom, right? Regardless of political pressure, career gain, or how it is going to affect you personally because you know who you serve, right? Courageous nobility.
Can you explain? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Thomas.
I was just going to say the nobility side of it. So courageous, but then the nobility for those that don't necessarily understand what that means.
So you think about nobility, you think about, or at least I do, I think about royalty, right?
Knight in shining armor.
Yes. I think about serving. I think about, is there something that you're willing to give your life for, right? Because that's noble. It's noble to stand in the gap. It's noble when Christ says, oh, you want to follow me? Well, foxes have holes and birds have nests. I don't even know where I'm sleeping tonight, right? And he still walks forward because he knows his mission. Mission-centered men and women are a force from God. And if you know your purpose and you know your direction, get to getting. And that's noble in the face. This is what I'm talking about. In the face, courageously, of people that will say over and over again, what you're doing is wrong. Who you are is wrong. Your message is off point. And you go, nah. You move it to the side then. You can be on this train or you can be run over by it.
Exactly.
So, and some of that is, and it's not egotistical because even though it's about the message, right, Andy?
Right.
I wanted to be a man that was bedrock firm on things. And so people know that they know what they're getting with me.
Yeah.
So we had this conversation and we talk more about it, but go on, Andy.
Well, I was going to say something about Travis. I don't know if you had seen, I was texting with Travis early this morning, but he actually, a week or so ago, got asked to leave a law enforcement conference because Travis, he's very outspoken about courageous leadership and about lack of courageous leadership and about cowards who are present in leadership. And he actually got asked to stop his presentation, not deliver the second half of it, and leave the conference.
Are you
Oh
kidding
my
me?
gosh.
And he left. I don't know the details on it yet. I just saw where he had posted something on it, and I texted him this morning. I said, I can't wait to hear this story. He told me he was in an airport. That was about 6:45 this morning somewhere. So he's supposed to call me later today and relay
Hold
that to
on.
me. But that's standing upon your principles,
Hold on a second. You mean to tell me
Yeah.
that at a law enforcement conference of law enforcement leaders, guys that are supposed to be standing up for what's right, he's given a presentation about courageous leadership.
Yeah.
And they asked him to leave.
Well, the promoters did. Whoever was putting on the conference did. I don't know if it was a department or an agency or whatever the case may be. But
Wow.
he also said that he got numerous text and email messages from guys who were present there saying, "We love what you were doing. We're glad you were here doing this, and we want to hear the rest of it." And he actually went and recorded a video of the remainder of his presentation and just emailed it to these guys.
Wow.
So that
for
moves
free
me
and
into something I
whatever.
want to ask you, Jeff, because you've been in law enforcement a long time, and you've seen the culture shift. I'm assuming quite a bit
yeah,
over the years.
Especially in, you're right outside of Phoenix.
Yeah, and we
Phoenix
talk about
Metro, so
we talk
big area.
about we talk about everything from purpose to faith to the leadership aspect of things and standing up for what you believe in and standing on truth, because we believe that that's something that we need to do. As law enforcement, doesn't matter if retired, active, whatever. How do you see the culture of law enforcement changing from when you started to now? What are your thoughts on that?
So it's a two-part answer.
Okay.
And I'll try to be shorter in my remarks so that I want to hear what you guys have to say about some things. But to Andy's point, Travis had called me because Travis and I are friends still too. We keep in touch a lot. He called me the day after. It's his story to tell, but I know the whole story. But for the sake of the people that are listening, I hope many, many people listen. If you don't ever get Travis's full story, because he is a man of integrity and humility, and he won't out the way it went. And to respect that, I'll tell you just in broad brushstrokes, the people that were in the class loved it. There were representatives from IACP and DOJ that were offended when he called them out.
Exactly.
And the promoter, as he's getting people in the front row saying, "We loved your message. Thank you," for the 8th year in a row, I might add. 8 years in a row we've been at that conference. He even said, "You shouldn't have me back. 8 years in a row, get somebody else." It just makes sense. The promoter looks and says, "You have to go. They're filing a complaint, and it doesn't matter what the complaint was for. Just understand it was not valid." Okay, so just work on that assumption.
Wow.
And he looked at her and he said, "Are you really going to prove real life the first 2 hours of what I just talked about to be true?"
Wow. Ugh.
Yeah.
And he walked away. And people were following him saying, we'll leave with you. We can do this rest of this thing at the bar. We're fine. We'll come with you. And he's like, no. Agencies paid for it. So you think about that. This is something about integrity as well. And then we'll talk about culture in a second. But
it's persecution. I mean, you got to stand up that part, just like your faith, and you're speaking about your faith and about your faith in God and Jesus Christ. This is just another example of standing up for what you believe in, standing upon a set of principles, and not backing down.
And to be honest, I'm proud of the guys that we're talking about leaving with him.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, they knew it was a good message. It was a righteous message.
Yeah, and you know what though, guys? When you fight, so what's you talk about fighting, standing for your ground. So he knows, and we all would know, hopefully, with more time on in life. And Thomas, as a pastor, jump in if you think I'm misspeaking here, but you know that there are battles that are worth fighting because it's going to lead to a righteous end, and some that, when the Bible says, "Don't cast your pearls to swine," even though I hate taking one verse out of context, right? The concept of what is my structure for this battle and what's the overall goal? He recognized immediately, well, the end result is written. So fighting this just becomes a matter of contention and pride. So he doesn't want to be a prideful man. He goes, nope, I'm just going to walk on this. And what's funny is if you look at his book sales jumped, he has sold more books now. If you look on the top, I think he's like 14th all time for books and leadership sold. It's just insane. And he's had hundreds of emails.
Wow.
By the way, he never actually gave his email address out. He never got to that point in the conference. So they tracked him down. So that's another shift in culture. So let's talk about culture now. Let's rebound into that. So I made a comment. I was interviewed by Kyle Reyes, law enforcement today, and that just went out on LinkedIn, had
I saw that.
huge drop on it. It was pretty good, right, Andy?
Yeah.
And the reason it was good is because it was Christ-focused. And Kyle's not walking away from any of that. He recognizes who he is. He knows as a law enforcement leader, he knows who I am. And we sat and had a great conversation. But I said there is, this concept of a great reset that our economic world wants to move to. And I said, I'm coining the great rebound. And I said it in a LinkedIn article on culture. So this is interesting. The end of this comes to this article I wrote after hearing the story. This is the story Travis told on Friday to me, right? He told me the story. I was fired up. And I sit down on my computer and my wife is planning the homeschool curriculum for the next week. She goes, uh-oh, what? And I put my earbuds in and she, yeah, oh yeah. She told the boys, hey, leave your dad alone. He's angry. And I said, no, I'm not angry. She goes, are you writing something? I go, I'm just going to write a post on LinkedIn real quick. I just have to get this out in a professional way. Well, as of this morning, it has been seen by 11,712 people and reposted over 50 times. So who knows? And what I just wrote about was a quick synopsis of an abdication of leadership and some questions to ask and some answers. So here's the culture. Eric, to your point, when we started, right, here was the culture I had. I walked into a brief room with 20 chairs. There were 6 guys on my squad. When I walk into the brief room, there were 5 chairs, and those 5 guys are sitting in them. Okay? Culture 1. Culture 101 there. Rookie, stand up against the wall. Yes, sir.
Yep.
And take my 3x5s out for notes. It was a 5 a.m. start. At 5:30, the sergeant looked at me, who had 30 years on. He said, what are you still doing here? And I hit the street to do my 5 traffic stops that I knew he wanted me to do, while the rest of the squad, they went to breakfast and they hung out until 8 a.m. Right? So they hung out the sergeant until 8 a.m. and I'm the one on the street keeping my mouth shut because, I probably should learn about this anyway. I want to get, educated at the University of Glendale Avenue kind of thing, right? So that culture moves on and you recognize you have to earn everything you get. You had to learn how to deal with people. Okay, so this blows people away. Thomas, you look a little younger than I am, so I'm just going to say this. All right,
he could be our child.
Yeah, you guys are triplets. It's weird. I'm just looking at you.
I'm not sure how to take
Facebook
that.
Facebook didn't come out until I was in homicide. We had the phones when we had cell phones. Remember this? You had to hit the 1 button 4 times to get A.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I'm not that young.
Did you ever have an alphanumeric pager? You had,
Yes.
you had those.
Okay, I didn't have that.
I had a pager going through investigations, all through violent crimes. You get paged out again. Here we go, right?
Yep.
But the culture was people. The culture was there's a group of men that have your back, and if you want them to have your back, you better show up with them. You better be present with them to go through good times and bad, on the job and off the job. It was very movie driven. But the culture was, after 9/11, you guys remember, everybody waved at us with all 5 fingers in the air. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We were like waving high. Everybody was very supportive. We had a law enforcement renaissance, as it were. Then we start seeing, and Travis, I think, definitely talks through it in his book in 2008 when Obama decides to, the whole election between McCain was an Arizona guy, right, and Obama, that was crazy. And that starts people going, wait a minute, we're going to be unrighteously indignant about things that don't have spiritual significance, that don't have integrity significance. But if we get people, it's like, look over here and I'll do something over here you're not seeing. That happened in 2006. And sure enough, and by 2008, right, when everything blew up, law enforcement started taking a shift. Now we have body cameras coming on, so people say, see, this point in time for your body camera, you guys are doing wrong things. And we all know it's not. As a supervisor, I love my body cameras. I diffuse complaints all day long, really, because the guy recorded it. Click. So the culture then moves from how do I get with people in relationships, and how do I build strong bonds? How do I, like John Maxwell would say, how do I become a lid lifter? How do I deal with the big rocks, like the Stephen Covey, what are the big rock issues, to all the secondary issues? How do I get a faster car? How do I get a new bougie uniform? Can I get tattoos? Eric is a lover of that. How do I do these things that aren't centered inside about intangibles, but make me entitled to want more? And so I've watched the culture shift. I watch it shift. And it wasn't just about Ferguson. I do a whole talk. My talk when we were speaking over in the conference, I talked about pulling over a car full of 4 black guys in September of 14, which is like a month after Ferguson happens, at night for speeding. All hands come out the windows, right? And I walk up, I go, why are you guys hands out the windows? They said, we don't want to be shot by a white cop.
Yep.
And I said, well, are you guys going to shoot at me? They said, no. Well, then there's no reason for me to shoot at you. And that led into a 25-minute discussion, at the end of which these 4 guys are out on the sidewalk because I'd seen a guy wearing a cross necklace. And I asked him if that was just jewelry, if that was faith. And he said, that's my grandma's, it's faith. And so ultimately, I'll save you guys a long story, but we're out on the side, and I was asking if I could pray for them. These old boys that, I had on a stop, and they're surrounded me in a half circle on a sidewalk in downtown, which is not a good area. And I hear my Marine and my Ranger young officers running up, yelling, "Sarge!"
Yeah.
And I'm starting to pray. And I go, stop. And I go, let's pray. And they put their hands on me because these guys think I'm getting my butt kicked. And they're watching. These guys are watching, like, they're bird dogging me. And I'm praying, and I'm just calling down Jesus for this group. And at the end, these men hug me and say, we've never met a cop like you. I said, well, you haven't met any cops, man. You've met people that just want to throw around weight. Well, they haven't met any cops anyway. They've met the media is what they met.
Yeah.
And so they left, and they all my business cards, and my officer said, I can't believe you just did that. And I said, I want you guys to know I pray for you the same way. And that was 2014, and that impacted them.
Cops have such an opportunity that a lot of times they don't seize. We need more Christian law enforcement officers out there in the community, and just think of the number of lives that you can touch. I sometimes, when I pray, and I pray for forgiveness from God, I pray, God, please forgive me of the years that I wasted, even as a Christian law enforcement officer. And I didn't do a lot of things that I should have done as a Christian law enforcement officer to impact people's lives. And I feel guilty about that now. But it is such a tremendous opportunity.
It gives me chills right now because Andy's right, man. And listening to you, I was the similar situation, man. You go out there and your whole mindset is, I got to go find the bad guy and I got to put the bad guy in jail, right? That's what we did. But how many opportunities did I miss because I was living the life that I was living, and I felt that I had to live up to this
RoboCop.
RoboCop image and stereotype that I thought everybody needed to see from me. And I missed all these opportunities to share the gospel of Jesus. I was saved when I was 16.
Eric has got chill bumps all over his arm.
Right now.
I'm looking at his arm, man. He's got chill bumps. And it's not cold.
It saddens me. It makes me sad because I can go back, and at 16, I was saved and I fell away. And it hasn't been till, the last few years that I was like, what have I been doing with my life? I was a police officer. I was, doing the right thing, serving justice, but I wasn't living the way God wanted me to. And I missed so many opportunities to share Jesus with people. And that breaks me. It crushes me.
Well,
let me say this too. I was the champion when it came to drinking people under the table every day after work. Bad alcoholic. Here's the thing I'll say to you guys, and Thomas hadn't said anything, so I'm curious to hear your response to this, because I know what my cop brothers are gonna think about this. Right? We can beat ourselves up. We can beat ourselves up about what we call missed opportunities, but the opportunities in that moment would never have presented themselves with vigor or passion unless you had gone through the struggles to refine you. I mean, David can't be David unless Saul was Saul.
Right.
You know what I mean? I can't have impacted these lives. When I talk about my struggle with alcohol, and I talk about this man at the conference that Andy saw, this dude who was a Hell's Angel enforcer that I had a mandatory contact with every month. You can read between the lines there. And 2 years later, I'm baptizing him and he's telling me his brother. That doesn't happen unless I become a recovering alcoholic because I bonded with him over alcohol. He's a recovering alcoholic. And that relationship got the gospel just wedging in there. That train's moving forward. And so men, I will tell you, and for people listening, your story that God has built you from the ground up is nothing to be ashamed about or to have guilt from or remorse. And even as Matthew 9 would talk about forgiveness, and we talk, Andy, right, about praying through forgiveness, we don't pray with a guilty heart. We pray with the heart like, oh, I pray for gratitude. Lord, thank you for recognizing that I suck.
Grace.
I sucked back then, even more. But thank you for moving that to now, because who knows what today is going to bring. And so guys, today, Thomas, right? Today, the next face in front of you is the most important face. Would you guys agree with that?
It makes sense.
Yeah. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, as law enforcement officers, and of course, Jeff, you know my verse, Romans 13:4. But I tell people, you know, they get caught up on the bear the sword portion of that. But the very first line in that verse says, for he is the minister of God to thee for good. And that's the biggest part of our jobs as law enforcement officers, as first responders, as people in general, as Christians in general. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. That's our main purpose in life.
Yeah. And I think of, you know, when you guys talk about, man, all these missed opportunities, you know, I have to just think about all the people in the Bible that were like that, you know, specifically Paul, right? I mean, my gosh,
Paul was horrible.
Yeah. You know
He
what
really
I mean?
was.
Talk
He was
about
horrible
somebody
for
that
him.
was not furthering the kingdom of God. I mean, he was literally as much in opposition to it as you could possibly be. And then Jesus gets a hold of his heart and just completely changes his life. You know, do you think Paul had a couple times in his life where he was like, man, I was such an idiot. You know?
Yeah,
wow, I wish I did not do that because it would make my life a lot easier right now.
We've been doing a
Some of these
discipleship
letters
study.
he's wrote, these.
We've been
Go on,
doing
Eric. I'm sorry.
We've been doing a discipleship study about Paul, and you use Paul as an example, man. That's amazing because Paul was a piece of he was a piece of trash.
Before
man.
that,
I mean, he was a
yeah,
piece of
yeah.
trash. But then he gets changed, and it's
And he
just
recognized
it's
that.
so he turns into, you know, and I don't want to cuss on our podcast, so I'm gonna try to figure out how to do this. He's just a bad dude after that, man, in a good way.
Yeah,
And he stands up and he doesn't care what he says as long as he's promoting Jesus and as long as he's sharing that with you and he's standing up that way. I mean, he just turns into this amazing role model.
Yeah. And I think that everything he had done before that was the urgency that caused him to operate the way he did after the fact.
That's
you know,
good. That's really good.
not that he felt like he had to make up for all of it, but that he realized who he used to be. And now it was time for him to not be that person in the most opposite way possible.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that that's what should propel us forward. Our testimony isn't for us to feel bad about ourselves, right? Jeff, you know, it's for us to use to give us the energy, the confidence, and the urgency to propel ourselves forward into the kingdom of God and propel his kingdom forward.
Yeah, guys, I'll tell you something right now. I was just looking this up. One of the best examples that I can think of about courageous nobility and a man of integrity. People say, well, it's Jesus. Okay, right. Well, you're going to mark yourself as a standard against Christ. Well, okay, you fall short, right? So, but who can I relate to? I'll tell you who I relate to. I relate to Stephen. You go to Acts 7:55, okay, right? You look in Acts and you look at when Stephen's defense, he stands up, knowing who he believes, knowing who he belongs to, and knowing that he's going to get serious persecution. And by the way, these guys are men like me and you, right? Tradesmen, hunters, warriors, family men. But he just recognized that there was something inside that was more important that had to be defended. And he defended it. And then in Acts 7:55, it reads, but being full of the Holy Spirit, he gazed intently into heaven and saw the glory of God and saw Jesus standing at the right hand of God as these guys were coming to kill him. And they killed him. Now, you want to talk about a guy who embodies courageous nobility, Stephen. And do I wish I could have more fortitude in some of the defenses? I would say yes. But I also, as I get older, my prayers have been, Lord, let me see let me see the difference of the battles. Let me recognize the ones that are worth fighting for you versus the ones that I want to win for me, right?
That's really
and
good.
then be able to gaze intently at Jesus, who stands up and says, "Let's go." You want to talk about getting chill bumps?
Yeah.
When I think about Jesus, I look up
and
I think about some of these battles. Because I'm not in command at my agency for many good reasons. I have taken stands that are not popular because I won't say yes or bend a knee.
yeah,
Right.
And you think about that, I think of Jesus going, "Okay, stand up. Here we go, Jeff. Here we go." And I get fired up. You can tell I'm a man of passion. And you want to get passionate about something? Giddy up. Let's go.
yeah.
That's the example I look at.
And that's I was just telling somebody the other day, it was this teenager that I've been talking with, and he struggles with in the same way I did when I was his age, and I still do even at times. It's something I have to work on. Knowing when to have compassion in your conversation with somebody versus courage, where you have to say something that they're not going to like, and in that, I think a lot of that not in being willing to stay convicted about the things you believe in and have courage in those conversations, or in any, even like what with Stephen or anything like that, it comes from fear. When you're afraid, it can be debilitating, but in that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've always heard that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward and doing what you know is right in the presence of fear.
Right.
Feeling afraid,
Yeah, I
but
would agree with
still
that.
doing what's right.
Yep.
So what I want to ask you, Jeff, is when do you have, because we're coming up on our time now, but when do you, a quick story or just a testimony of when you've had to have that kind of courage, that courageous nobility, where you were terrified or you were afraid and you still did what you knew God was calling you to do, or still did what you knew was right.
Well, like you said, as a cop, that's kind of like an easy line to cast, because I can just pick examples. Well, there was a guy in a building, we went in anyway, and and I did this, but I would think that some of the things I took stands. I can remember specifically the moment I knew I would never be promoted beyond sergeant. Okay. And here's when it happened. I took a stand at an all staff meeting. Somebody had said something, and I said, I raised my hand, and the chief was like, "Yeah." And I said, "I don't agree with that, and here's why." And I outlined why it was. And I said, if we are to be peace officers and law enforcement officers, and I can't remember the exact words I used, I said that there has to be a different way to do it. Our why statement is in question right now. And I'm just wondering if we should take a step back and really understand our why before moving forward. And you should have seen the looks in the room. It was almost like the old Kenny Rogers song. You could hear a pin drop as he stopped and locked the door. And because I was like, nope, here we go. And people, my buddy next to me, you just hear him go, "Oh." I was president of our union at one point, so they knew who I was, and they knew what I was going to say. That was one. Another one, I knew I was. I got to be careful how I say this. I was in a relationship with an individual, and that person was unfaithful to their spouse. Okay, and it was well known in the department. I called my wife. I said, "Well, you got to know I'm going to be fired today." She said, "Okay," without even missing a beat. This should tell you how often I would do this. She goes, "Okay, cool. What time do you want dinner?"
Now, wait. To clear this up,
This is real. It's real this time.
Yeah, being in a relationship with this person, you mean you were just in you weren't in like an affair. You're saying you had,
no.
You knew this person. You were
I
close
don't want
to
to
this person.
define. I don't want to define the roles, because
Okay,
I know
all
people
right.
could listen.
Okay,
Yeah.
never mind.
So let's just be super clear about that. Okay.
Yeah.
Just, I know a person. A friend of mine is asking a question, right?
Oh, I got you.
And I just went in. I went with another brother, and I just confronted this guy for his sin at work. I took time in the middle of my workday, confronted this man, who it was, and I said, "What you're doing is wrong. You can't do what you're doing anymore. I will not stand idly by and watch this happen." He looked at me like, "Huh?" And he was broken in that moment, and it didn't matter. But Ultimately, that wasn't my result to hold, but taking that step forward when everybody else around me was like, what are you doing? Jeff, seriously, you can't you can't go up there. You can't do that. I'm like, no, I can't not. I can't not, because everybody's ignoring the elephant in the room, Thomas. People don't want to talk about the hard stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There are men and women that are set apart, sanctified to talk about the hard stuff. And when I took that stand, that was in that same week of that meeting, I told my wife, I go, man, I'm going to be the best sergeant ever. That's all. I'm about lots of practice for that.
So I will be the senior sergeant at Glendale PD. Right?
No question about that. No question.
That's funny.
Yeah.
But those were some of those quickly defined moments that I knew that and it just continues, right? It continues, but it continues now as I have my young son is almost 16. He's a cadet in our program. And he told me last night, and I'll leave this thought for you guys as we close up, but I'm trying to get emotional about this.
Right.
I'm driving him back from the cadet meeting, and he says, hey, Dad, I got to tell you something. I really appreciate you teaching me how to be a man. And I was like, okay. I just don't know where that goes. And he said, yeah, we can go shooting, because he knows this. Here's what he says. We can go shooting, or we can go fighting, or we can learn how to drive. But you taught me how to be a man of faith. You taught me how to stand for what I believe. You taught me about my purpose. You taught me how to be a man. And I didn't even know what to say. And then he came home and told my wife, thanks for being the best mom and the best homeschool teacher I could have had. And it's like, where does this old soul wisdom come from?
Right.
But seriously, Eric, I see it in your eyes, man. Right?
Yeah.
When your kid says that to you, and he got mad one day. His eyebrows came down when I said, you don't have to be a cop if you don't want to. And he looked at me and goes, don't you tell me what I can and can't do. I'm here to serve. I'm here to serve people as a cop. And he smiled. He goes, that's what we do.
I remember you telling me at the conference. Yeah, I remember you telling me at the conference, you brought your wife and sons over and introduced them to me after I got through speaking. And you said, this one right here, he wants to be a cop.
Dude, that's amazing. Man.
Cheers.
So good.
How do you respond to that? Thank you for teaching me. That's awesome. That is
I
awesome.
said I love you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all you can say, man. That is awesome.
Yeah, right. For real.
All you do.
You did something right, man.
Yeah.
Praise God, man, because absent that constant thread of faith, we're just doing the best we can day to day, and that's ridiculous because our best stinks.
That's one of the things we want to push here is men stepping up and being men again, and in doing that, not just your sons, not just your daughters. We have to do it for everybody out there. We've got to get everybody to step back into that role. And it starts with our kids. And that's I can't tell you how awesome that is. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I do want to just ask one more question, Andy. I know I'm taking it.
Really.
But this will be my final question. But what do you think it takes to become that kind of man that is courageous, that you would say has courageous nobility?
Well, you certainly don't stumble onto it, because left to our own devices, all of us will take the easy road, the one with least conflict, because it's comfortable. And we see that in our hiring and recruiting efforts right now. I'm a big fan of the mentoring and discipleship. If you don't have an example, like if I don't have a correct path of travel, then I'm using Google Maps, right? It's ridiculous. You have to have somebody that is in your life saying, no. No one actually, like the guy did for me, they don't actually respect you. They laugh at you. You have to have somebody that first tells you, hey, there is a different path. There are things that the Lord is going to gift us with, and he's just waiting for us to flourish in our strengths. He's waiting for us to acknowledge our weaknesses. But until you have a man or a woman that's going to come alongside you and inform you, hey, you have these things. Do you know that there's an explanation for that, and teach you about the Bible? I'm assuming people, like all these pre-Christians rolling around, that's what I call them, right? All these pre-Christians rolling around that don't know, they're not, remember what I said? Integrity is attractional. I said, put a pin in that. When you yourself are the example, even though I've had a failed life in some respects, when my kid says that to me, knowing I'm a recovering alcoholic, knowing that I did drugs through college, knowing that I wasn't the best husband, knowing that I was this and that, he said that to me anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Because integrity is attractional, and I get to point my kids towards Christ. We point people towards the giver of integrity. I don't have to book and chapter you all day long, man. I have to live a life that is verse by verse representation of the man that I want to be. And then other men will see that and go, wait a minute, why are you not upset when you're in a fight with your wife? I'm like, well, probably my fault, and you lead them differently. And so the path to courageous nobility is a path through mentorship and discipleship. And honestly, guys, one-on-one or one-on-two kind of things that's the secret sauce. If it wasn't, I challenge you to tell me what Jesus did. Because he didn't give 1,000 people the message, he gave 12.
Mm-hmm.
It's one-on-one, man. It's the mentoring and the discipleship that leads to commitment. And that commitment shows integrity, it shows character, and that's attractional.
It is.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, closing out today, if you would give everybody your social media addresses, how to get in contact with you if they want to, your Substack, whatever the case may be. I've read a lot of Jeff's stuff. I subscribe to his Substack. Tell them how to get in touch with you and how to hear more of your message.
Well, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity for that. Again, as a disclaimer, after my dad passed, I'm the oldest, so everything fell on me. Take care of my mom. It's fallen on me, and in a lot of regards.
Right.
So there's been this delay. So I'm starting to write again and do my podcast again. Just want to give a disclaimer to that, but I can be reached at Jeff Daukas. That's JeffDaukas, all one thing together. .substack, substack.com. It actually houses my podcast as well. My podcast is on Spotify or Apple. It's called Trust the Truth with Jeff Daukas. It's pretty cool. I love it. My social stuff, I have my own email account through Courageous Nobility at protonmail.com. That's all one word, Courageous Nobility, and then Proton, Proton, protonmail.com. So I encourage you, if you guys want to reach out or you want to pass the message along, I've got ever since this thing on Friday, I've been getting a ton of people that want to talk.
Right.
So that's the way I would say, stay connected. But if nothing else, forget me, forget what I'm writing about, forget the podcast, forget even what we're doing on Shepherd Station here today. Find somebody that you look at and you go, why is that person doing what they're doing? And ask some questions. And if you have that heart that wants to be of service to people, then you're lining up with where the Lord's going to take you. Bless you. And so that is going to be attractional, and people are going to tie into that. And whether or not you know anything about, if you never heard anything, you're listening to this station right now, this podcast, you're like, wow, this guy's crazy. Can't believe he told that to some black dudes, which is about the only thing you heard if you don't have a sense of faith.
Right.
You recognize that it is not about you, person who doesn't know me. It is about the person who made you. Right. If you want to figure that out, contact me. We'll talk more about it.
That's good.
That is good stuff.
And Jeff's got a pretty huge presence on LinkedIn. If you want to follow him on LinkedIn, he makes quite a few posts and stuff on there. And I'm sure, and when this podcast releases here in the next few weeks, and I know Jeff will be releasing it on his LinkedIn there too. And maybe that'll bring some more people to listen to our podcast, The Shepherd Station. And like we said, it's never about us. And if we do 1,000 episodes of this podcast, if we only reach one person, then we've done what God has called us to do. And as you know, I try to remind myself a lot of time, God doesn't call us to be successful. He calls us to be faithful. So, and Amen. A lot of times we don't know about the successes that God has gained through us, his vessels. And Jeff, saying all that, if you got any final words, be glad to hear them from you. And I also want you to lead us on a word of prayer as we close today.
I can do both. First of all, I want to tell Thomas, you seem very pensive and you seem to be a deep thinker. So thanks for that. I appreciate it. Keep leading your people well. Match up your intellect with your heart for people. That's what I see in you. For my painted warrior in the middle, there is never a man so grateful and so sold out for the gospel as one who's been broken by it. And I look at you and I want you to remember that. I see a man who's been broken by the stuff in your life, brother. Now, you and I have been through some stuff.
getting me teary eyed.
He's teared up. Dude.
Yeah,
He really is.
See, I wonder if I'm just guessing here. No, man. When you have a kindred spirit and you look into another man's heart, even through something like this, and we never met, right, Eric?
No,
Nope,
we haven't.
never.
That's pretty awesome. It is.
You had never met, and so just be aware, man, that your necklace around your outward reminder of your necklace is the inward change of the gospel that broke you at one point. Let it be the anvil that other people are sitting on, that you help gently break them. And for my brother Andy, I'll tell you now, my life is better having you as part of my tribe. And that's the highest compliment. I would trust my family's life to you. And so that's the highest compliment I can give. And you men are doing God's work. And I constantly say that police departments, governments, and churches are faithfully run by exhausted men. So let's be exhausted for the right reasons, okay?
That's good.
All right, why don't we go and pray, guys? Lord, thank you for this time, this opportunity. Thank you for these men and this message. And Lord, that you gave us even technology that we can have a podcast and talk about the things that, when we all started in law enforcement, that this wasn't even available, Lord, that we had to figure out how to write emails and do blogs and figure out if that was going to work, Lord. But you've given us another form by which to bring your message to people in a real and tangible way. And Lord, with these men and with me and myself, there is passion that is delivered with the gospel, because it is good news. And Lord, so many times as cops, we walk into situations where we are the only good news in the middle of chaos, in the middle of a complete tragedy. Lord, I pray for every single cop right now that hears my voice, every single law enforcement officer that's on the street today, that they would be the calm in the storm, and they would be that moment of peace. They would be that 10 minutes of peace in 10 years of chaos in someone's life. Because Lord, men and women of integrity are attractional. Lord, would you let us be attractional for you today? And I just wonder what would happen if we as men decided to take this message forward minute by minute and not just week by week. Give us the strength in our moments of weakness, Lord, and give us friends and brothers like these men to walk worthy as we carry on and bear the sword well. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Amen. Hey, I want to make a point too. Jeff actually took a vacation day today. He took time off that he's earned at his job to take off. He took off today just to be with us because this is the time that we record our podcast. And man, we love you, brother. And I sure do appreciate you. And Jeff, he's been in constant contact with me since we left Indiana. And he's the kind of guy that'll send me a text just out of the blue and start, "Hey, brother, what can I pray for you today?"
Well, Jeff, I hope that you're able to do that for me too, because I'm probably about to hit you up on several social media platforms.
Okay, well, let's make it happen, man. And anything we can do
get
to stay in
getting. I
contact,
like that.
I'd love to contact with you guys more. I need that in my life more than you know.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely be in contact. And Jeff, we're going to have you back on again. Okay, be prepared again to do another episode here on the Shepherd Station.
Let's go.
Yeah, we'll talk about leadership in the midst of the storm.
Right.
That's
like
a
it.
good one. I love it.
Sounds good.
Sounds great. We appreciate you being on with us today.
So to close this out today, what I do want to add, listen, Thomas, if you will, tell everybody what platforms we're on, because we thank everybody who's listening to us. Please continue to listen to us. We hope that our shows guide you and move you and touch you in ways that it makes you better. We need your support. We ask for your support. Thomas, you can tell everybody what we're on.
Yeah,
because
totally.
you take care of all that. So.
Yeah. So we're on anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can find us: Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. YouTube has podcasts now. We're there as well. And then also you'll probably be watching this on YouTube if you're seeing the video. So you'll be able to find us there. Give us a like and subscribe to us, because that helps our videos, all of our content, get in front of those people that need it most. Men that need to hear what Jeff said today. Doing that is the easiest way to push these messages forward. And then if you're on Apple Podcasts, give us a review. Let us know how we're doing. We love talking with you guys and hearing your feedback. We want to hear that stuff from you guys as well.
Follow us on Facebook.
And Facebook, Facebook, Instagram, all of that.
The Shepherd Station.
Yeah.
It's the one
Sure.
with the two crossed staffs.
Yeah.
So
So there you go.
Rod and the staff.
Thank you, Jeff, so much.
thank
man.
you so much.
You brother.
Thank you, guys.